So thank you so much for joining this session. I can't even imagine how much content you've all consumed today. It's earlier in the day for me. I know it's very late in the day, and it's been a very jam-packed one for you all. So thanks so much for joining for this one. I know you must be exhausted. Hang on with me. This will be a good one. Okay, so I would love to get a sense, and this is like a raise of hands kind of thing. Obviously, I can't actually see your hands raised, but it would be good if you all sort of asked yourselves, and I would love a bit of a level set here on if any of you have ever asked yourselves any of these questions. So, we have a top of funnel problem, or we really need more acquisition, or, we need more leads. Oh my God. All four. Thanks, Amanda. We need to increase our traffic, all this stuff that, when we think about marketing, our heads just go directly to this type of thing. And honestly, the vast majority of companies, this is the number one reason why companies reach out to my team. But what if I told you that even though this is the number one reason that companies reach out to us, typically the top of funnel isn't the solution to their problem. 99% of the time, or very, very often, traffic is actually healthy, or even the number of leads or signups that they're getting are relatively healthy and okay. But where there's a real problem, where things start to really sort of break down, is when, of all of the universe of people out in the world that come to check out this product or check out your website, that is where things start to break down. That is where, people who signing up for when they get to your website or they sign up for your product, that's really where things start to sort of fall apart. And that this is really the biggest opportunity for the vast majority of companies in terms of looking for revenue growth. So my goal for you for this session is to help you figure out for your company of all the different opportunities you could pursue right now to grow revenue. Is it truly an acquisition opportunity that you have? Is it truly, more traffic that you need? Or is there a hidden breakdown further in the customer's experience that's actually where you should be spending your time, where you could be investing? Once you get the answers to these questions, you can make way, way, way more informed decisions about where to invest your marketing resources. And you can feel a lot more confident too in the investment bets that you make after you've answered these questions as well. Before we jump in, I just want to make a quick sort of level set here. This session is meant to be diagnostic in nature. So, figuring out, are the channels that we're using broken? Do we have an acquisition problem, or are the words that we're using broken? Do we have a messaging and product marketing problem? And the other thing that we may talk about, we're going to talk about messaging, we're going to talk about copy, but this is not copywriting tips and tricks. If you are interested in becoming a great copywriter, or getting better at that, I would definitely recommend you check out Joanna Wiebe over at Copy Hackers. The other thing is that for this session, the steps that we're going to run through will be most useful if you have established demand for your product. So you have access to paying customers. It's not that this process isn't going to be useful for those of you who are pre-launch or that don't have paying customers yet, but the process is a little bit different. So for the sake of clearly communicating in the very limited amount of time that we have, I'm going to focus on those of you who have paying customers and who have established demand for your product. Okay, so now you might be wondering, who the heck is this person? I've been marketing online for over 20 years. I've been working with software as a service businesses for over 10. I'm a marketing and growth advisor, primarily on the B2B SaaS side of things. And I've worked with companies and advised companies pre-launch up to 100 million in ARR. I'm also the co-founder and CEO of Forget the Funnel. We work primarily with B2B SaaS companies that work in an SMB space on their growth strategies. We also support and teach others to do the same. So we work with consultants, in-house strategists. We teach them our process and our framework that we use. This is my co-founder, Claire Sullentrop. Her and I are on a mission to abolish two things: useless and wasteful customer research, and research that goes nowhere, essentially, and also generic or spaghetti at the wall growth tactics. There is nothing we hate more than those two things, is people, experimenting with marketing strategies or experimenting with growth strategies without a reason why, other than some expert out in the space told them that they should try it when it has Nothing to do with their product, nothing to do with their customers. So Claire has deep expertise on the customer research side of things, and I take that research and I turn it into revenue opportunities for businesses. With that out of the way, let's dive into what we're actually here for, which is figuring out, do you have a channel problem, an acquisition problem, or do you have a words problem, a messaging, positioning, and copy problem? Okay, for the steps that I'm going to run through, again, I'm trying to blast through this. We are going to use an example, which is LifeLapse. Now, it's not important necessarily what this company does, but just to give you sort of the lay of the land and an example of where they were when we started working with them. This is a tool that helps you create stop motion videos on your phone. They were getting about 22,000 new uniques per month on their website when we started working with them. They were averaging about 55,000 average monthly downloads, and they had tens of thousands of free users and a few thousand paying customers. The opportunity at the time, by the way, whether or not you're bigger or smaller, whether or not those numbers sound big or small to you doesn't matter, because the process is the same. But the opportunity that this company came to us with was that they wanted to attract more B2B customers rather than purely B2C. And that was because they had a hypothesis that they would have a greater lifetime value, B2B customers. The CEO's assumption was that they should be launching some sort of PR strategy, that they should partner with influencers, and that was what was going to really drive more B2B signups for them. This was very obvious to the CEO. So this is basically the answer. These are the steps that we're going to go through. This is what you need to do in order to take advantage of this type of work that I'm going to run through. We're going to identify your ideal customers to learn from, uncover why they bought your product, and then spot the gaps between what they say they need and what you say you provide. And I'll share the results with you at the end. Spoiler alert, they're really good. So, okay. Let's talk about who the ideal customers are for you to learn from. That's really an important distinction. So not all your customers are created equally. You have some customers that I'm sure are paying for your product that are using it through just brute force. They're retrofitting it to make it useful for them, but they don't necessarily. You wouldn't consider them to be an ideal customer. We want to learn from your customers who, and this is like graphic, but it's the best way to sort of think about it, is those customers who you would have to pry your product out of their cold, dead hands. We want more of those customers. So in order to find more of those customers, we need to learn from the customers who already feel this way about you. So the three criteria that I would say are useful here is they should be happy customers, happy with your product as it exists today. So they're not holding on for dear life until you develop into something else, but your value proposition that you have today serves them very well. They're paying for your product, and they've paid for your product more than once. So they're getting continued value. And then also, and this is really important, they've gotten value from your product recently enough that they remember what life was like before they found you. And this is really, really critical. And I'll get into that in a second. But generally what we say is customers who you've acquired in the last 3 to 6 months, this is your sweet spot of customers that you really want to learn from. This is a really, really important. We don't want to learn from your customers who are looking at the door. This isn't an exit strategy. We're not trying to learn from your canceled customers. We're trying to learn from the best customers that you have today so that we can go out and find more of them. Next step is uncovering why those customers bought from you. So we're going to use a framework called Jobs to be Done. Some of you may be familiar. I know that there was a talk in the design track earlier today on Jobs to be Done, which is fantastic. Some of you may know this framework essentially, but we're going to use it to figure out why these amazing customers bought your product out of all of the other options available to them. Why did they choose you? And the Jobs to be Done framework is based upon this theory that people hire your product to get a job done. So rather than asking people what product they want, we want to try to understand what they're trying to achieve and understand how they measure success each step of the way to accomplishing that job. So you've all seen this slide before, I'm sure a billion times. Also, I used it earlier in this deck, but it's essentially this idea. People don't buy your product, they buy what your product enables them to do. They buy a better version of themselves. So let's figure out what it is that you sell and how to use that to get more signups and ultimately better customers for your product. So for this stage and this uncovering why they bought, we're going to use a mini job to be done interview, which is essentially a survey. And I know that the sort of purest customer researchers or researchers out in the world will say, you cannot do this with a survey. And in general, I would agree. However, for early stage companies, we can figure out a lot using a survey. Surveys can point us in the right direction, and they can give us confidence in hypotheses about what our customer jobs are. If you don't have enough customers to run this type of survey, then I definitely would recommend that you run an interview running through similar questions, which I'll get into in a second. But surveys can actually be really, really effective, even though, yes, I admit they're sort of a quick and dirty solution to this. I will provide at the end of this a link to where you can find these questions. And actually, there's even email copy templates in there as well that you can use to send this survey to your customers. Okay, so let's go through the questions because you're going to see that it's kind of like a documentary that we're creating for your customers here. So this first question speaks to the recency factor. So prior to our product, what were you doing to solve, the problem that we help you solve? If you were using any other tools or products, what were those? Again, we're asking them, what was life like before? And then question number 2 is, when did you realize you needed something like our product? What was going on in your world that caused you to start looking for something new? Now, some of you may have heard, this like trigger moment or the trigger to seek a better solution. The answer to this question is absolute gold. Again, remember, we're learning from your best customers here. Not all customers are created equally. Of those best customers, what did they say happened in their world to cause them to start looking for something new? This is like so valuable. Next question probably doesn't need a lot of explaining. How did you find out about our product? But you can see that it's like life before, that moment where they decided, I've got to solve this problem. I can't live like this anymore. What did they do next, right? Where did they go to find out and solve this problem? And then after that, why did you decide to choose us over other options? Can you recall if anything in particular appealed or stood out to you? Now, you can imagine the answers to this question are going to give you a lot of insight into what are our competitive advantages? What are those differentiators of all the options out in the world to solve this problem? Potentially, those might be direct competitors, indirect competitors, alternative solutions. But of all of those, this is why they chose us. You can imagine what we put on our website can be largely determined by the answers to those questions. And then when you signed up for our product, what happened or made you feel certain that it was right for you? Now, a lot of people have a lot of words for describing what this is, right? Some people call it an aha moment. Some people call it, activation. We like to think of it as first value. But it's really, you can imagine that if you have the answer to this question, you would know exactly what to serve up to your customers when they sign up for your product, right? So, if you have a software product, you might think of this as like, what feature should we introduce to them first, second, third? This is really, really, really valuable to get the answer to that question. And then now that you have, this product in your life, what's the number one thing that you're able to do now that you weren't able to do before? This gives you insight into the desired outcome. What are they trying to accomplish? What does it mean to them that they have you in their life now? So these survey questions, the goal in general, as you might have noticed, none of these are multiple choice. They're all open text. So in general, we say aim for about 25 to 50 responses here because they're open text. After you get to about 50 or so responses, you get to the point of like diminishing returns because you've got to read the text on each of these and really sort of understand what all of them are saying. Now, there's a few exceptions or a few considerations. For instance, if your customers are developers, not to pick on developers, but if your customers are developers, the answers to these surveys questions are going to be a lot shorter, a lot more direct, as opposed to if your customers are entrepreneurs or marketers, both of which I can pick on because I am both of those, they might be longer and more descriptive. So bear your customers in mind here on how many you think you need in order to get to a level of confidence in the patterns that you're seeing come up here. And again, that's what we do next, right? With those 25 to 50 responses, then what we're doing is we're looking for patterns in those responses, especially in that trigger moment. So this is an example. This is an example of responses from the LifeLabs survey. As you can see, we've started to color code those patterns because we started to see the same things coming up over and over again in the responses. And so we had, 3 or 4 different customer jobs essentially popping up in these survey responses among these ideal customers. And now our job is to figure out, not all of those are created equally as well. So we've got to choose one of those jobs one of those customer jobs or jobs to be done that we want to focus on moving forward. So we start to organize all of that data into, we've got a template for this, which I'm happy to share with you, which we call a job to be done brief, where basically organize all of the survey data into a document. But we have a really important decision to make, as I was saying. We've got to decide, of these 2 or 3 customer jobs that present themselves, these trigger moments that present themselves in these survey responses, which one of them are we going to focus on? And this is a really amazing opportunity and a really critical decision to make. So for LifeLabs, what happened was we had 2 dominant customer jobs that we could have viably decided to focus on. I say viably because they both represented really interesting potential markets for us. They're both getting a lot of value from the product as it existed today, right? So these, some of the criteria, and this is not an exhaustive list, but some of the criteria they might think through is like understanding the value that your product provides without needing a lot of convincing. So, right, that's why I use the little like boom emoji there. Like they get it. They understand what it is that you do. There's not a lot of education needed around what you do. Another one is willingness to pay, right? Do they have a budget? I don't need to explain why that's valuable or important. Long-term potential, really critical, especially if your business is based on recurring revenue, like software as a service is. Long-term potential is critical. And then another one that's very, very important, and maybe the most important, is they have an urgent need. So we call this like a hair on fire problem, right? They're not just like curious. It's not an option for them. They have to solve this problem, and it's urgent that they solve this problem. There's other criteria that you might want to think about, like there might be a certain industry that you prefer to focus on, or you might have an unfair advantage with one customer job over another. Or another interesting one to think about, especially in terms of acquisition and marketing, is do they congregate? Does one of these customer jobs congregate in meaningful ways that make them really easy to market to? That's another really big advantage. For LifeLabs, we had 2 dominant jobs, like I said. One of them was newer to content creation. And so they were sort of, that goes without saying. They were newer to content creation. They were more likely to be using this content that they were creating for personal use rather than a business use case. But they were our biggest group. They represented the biggest opportunity of the customers that LifeLabs had at this time. The other group, job 2, was they were more experienced creators. They were more likely to be representing a brand or a business selling something. Right? Very important, especially with this opportunity. Likely to already be paying for other content creation tools. Huge. Like they already shell out money for other solutions in this same sort of, with this a similar use case. And also they were experiencing a real pain rather than just being curious. They had a real pain around their business or the content that they were creating. So for us, this was a no-brainer. We absolutely had to focus on job 2. So now that we've had that focus, and we've made that decision, now we have to figure out, are we even speaking this person's language, right? Are we meeting these people where they are with what we're doing today? So this was the hero of the homepage for LifeLabs at the time. Shoot stop motion videos up to 10 times faster with LifeLabs. Nothing inherently wrong with this, right? Like it's not that the copy's not bad or whatever, but we need to figure out now, what do we need to do? And so we started sort of with the homepage, right? The main sort of value proposition. So does this meet this customer job where they are? Not so much, right? Because when we look at the data that we gathered from that survey, we see things like fresh new ways, exciting and eye-catching. I wanted more exciting, eye-catching content for my business. I wanted to elevate my content. I wanted photos that came to life. So we have to ask ourselves, do we use the actual words or phrases that they use? Or are we speaking our own jargon, like 10 times faster? Nobody said anything about speed being the thing that led them to seek out something new. Are we addressing their biggest anxieties that are holding them back? Do we highlight the benefits and features that they care about most? What we realized here was that, hell, this is more about creating more creative content and more engaging content. That was clearly what these people were trying to accomplish. So what we did was we updated the website. I'm only talking about one particular asset here, but we updated the website with this new headline, but increase engagement on social will stop motion. Bring your brand to life with beautiful, eye-catching videos. It's not that we completely removed the you can do it quickly, right? Learn, film, and share your first video in under 7 minutes. So we still addressed this, like, you can do this quickly and easily need, but we are focused way, way, way more on this increase in engagement versus speed to create the videos themselves. There's a stark contrast in the words being used here, but also in the value proposition, as you can see. Now, getting into the results, spoiler alert, obviously this was a win. After 50 days, the signups increased 93%. Now, don't forget, the CEO came to us thinking that they had an acquisition opportunity by launching a PR campaign, right? They wanted to move into this new market, and they were thinking, well, what's all the marketing that we can do around attracting these people? But after a few conversations, a really simple survey, it was clear that product marketing was actually the real opportunity. And so we zeroed in on this ideal customer. We lifted new messaging and copy straight from those survey responses, as you saw. And the result was an increase, not only in the signups, but also there was a nearly 20%, 19% sales increase as well in this time. And don't forget, we didn't do any new marketing. We didn't send any new traffic to this website at all. Similarly, we ran through this same process with a company called Meet Edgar. During this period, we shortened the trial from 30 days down to 7, and still the signups increased by 89% as a result of these messaging updates. And as an added bonus, the trial to pay conversion rate, even though we didn't do anything to the trial experience, we didn't update anything there. All we did was update the messaging on the website. The trial to pay conversion rate also increased 40%, just because that messaging was that much more resonant and bringing in that much higher quality customers for the company. Similarly, Autobooks was looking to reposition themselves. In this case, we used interviews, about a dozen or so interviews. Refined the messaging strategy, increased new user signups by 65%. With Sprout Social, they were looking to get more ROI from the marketing they were already investing in. And they knew that they should improve the SMB onboarding process. And so we actually tapped into existing research that they were already doing, surveys they were already running, and we increased the onboarding by 92%. So the big sort of takeaway here is top of funnel and more traffic, is often the thing that we are so focused on. So many of us do this. We're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it too. But if we remember that increasing revenue might be much closer to home than you think. Traffic is really expensive, right? Especially when you start thinking about paid acquisition. But you can generate more revenue from the traffic that you already have. And then think about it. Once you've optimized your messaging to match this customer, this ideal customer's job to be done using their voice of customer, then when you turn up the tap, or turn up the volume or whatever on your marketing, it's going to be worth that much more. So that is it for me. As a reminder, you can find that survey at ftf.fyi JTBD-survey. We're writing a book on this process, which we call customer-led growth. It's the framework that we use to do this type of work. If you're interested in being a beta reader, you can go there. And if you have any questions about any of this, feel free to shoot me an email, or if you're interested in working with us on something like this, feel free to shoot me an email. Also, you can find me on Twitter if you prefer to use that. Okay, that is it for me. I will jump over to the Q&A. That's the 2D Hangout Q&A. If anybody has questions, I'll be over there. And thanks so much for joining me.